Welcome back, students, and let's talk about the production possibilities curve. So we like to make the examples very easy for our first year introductory classes. So now we're going to talk about how firms produce on their side of the economy. Consumers are a little bit harder to predict because why? You have free will. You can do whatever you want. But firms, they want money, they want profits. So they're a lot easier to predict. So we'll cover more about consumers in the second course, microeconomics, where individuals make decisions because there's so many of you. But firms, even though there's many of them, they have very predictable patterns that they can work in to make a profit. So that's what we're going to look at. Now, everything that we're going to look at is in 2D, okay, 2 dimensions. Why? Because we can make a two-dimensional graph, and with our two eyes, we can understand it. A causes B, right? This, whatever we do on one axis of the graph, increases something else or decreases something else. On the other axis, we look at two things at a time, okay? If we had 20 eyes, like a honeybee, and could see in 20 dimensions, then we could do this 20-dimensional graph and understand it, but we're humans, so two things at a time. Again, a choice between one or the other. So we're going to look at choice between apples and oranges. What should you bake? So let's again go back and think of ourselves on a desert island. We can pick apples, we can pick oranges, but we cannot work 24 hours a day or 80 hours a day or something like this. Just can't be done. So we're going to have to make a trade-off between two things. If we are the producer, if we're the farmer producing for ourselves, the hunter-gatherer picking the fruit for ourselves, or if we're a farming company. So the graphs are going to look something like this, where you have some amount of good 2 and some amount of good 1, and you have to decide what the trade-off is. And it could curve around like this, which means that as you get towards the working like very extensively towards one end of things, like all the banana trees or whatever, or all the apple trees or whatever, it's going to get tiring, or you're going to start to run out of apples. And instead of going straight up all the way to the top, you're going to start to bend down as if you were tired, right? The curve is going to bend down. It means it's not achieving the highest number, it's achieving a lower number. So when that happens, when you get tired towards the end of the day, or you run out of apple trees at the end of the day, you run out of orange trees at the end of the day, or some of the oranges or apples are spoiled if you just focus on one extreme or the other, we call that diminishing returns. A very important concept, which is going to figure very high on the test, on the first quiz. So let's focus on that, okay? Basically, how this works is that, let's say have a company that makes guns inside the factory, and outside they have a bunch of cows making butter. Kind of ridiculous example, but from the book. And so what's going to happen is as you start to move towards the end, you're only going to produce 5 more, for example. Pardon me. Sorry about that. So, whereas in the middle of the day, let's say, or the morning when you first get in, you're producing the most amount of both. You can't keep going up in a straight line from there. You're going to start to decline, because what's going to happen is, let's say the workers are working 8 hours here, and then they start working towards making more and more guns, working like 12 hours, their productivity is going to drop off. So if you lay off these workers here who are making butter, going across is butter, they're going up as making guns, and you lay off these workers here making guns, you're only going to lose like 5 boxes of guns, because these workers, when they get to the top of the guns, it means making guns all day, all day, all day, all day. Machines are going to get tired. People are going to get tired. Machines do get tired, by the way. Metals get stressed and break and wear out, especially if they're not oiled and maintained periodically or turned off to cool off. So you lay off these extra hours here, 3 hours or 4 hours or of overtime, or in these workers, you're only going to lose 5 boxes of guns, right? And then instead, you work more towards prime time, towards the middle of the day, the beginning of the day, 8 hours here from B to C. Then you're going to get 10 more boxes of butter because you're moving away from the extreme. When you have a balance between the two, you can have some workers over here, some workers over there, and they don't get as tired, right? Because they're working 8 hours, they're working in the middle of the day, and you split the work between two groups of people. It's not like you're driving these workers like into the dust by working them to death towards the wee hours of the night, towards the extremes, right? Just the gun people working lots and lots and lots of hours. So they're going to become unproductive here. So the line is going to slope down. It's not going to be straight up and down as we saw over here. Okay, so that's a basic principle you need to know. Now let's move on and let's discuss the production possibilities curve and what that's looks like. So we're going to assume that we have a Robinson-Crusoe economy, and the more you produce of one, the less you produce of the other, and that's going to be the production possibilities curve, right? So basically an example of that, let me open my Excel. Where's in my Excel? Open up a blank workbook here. An example of that is going to be where we have apples over here on the left, and put a left margin there, and the oranges over here on the bottom, put a bottom margin over here. You get to begin to learn a little bit of Excel along with this. And let's make the background white. And so we're going to say this is apples, and we're going to say this is oranges. And first, we have to make a production supply schedule. Which a schedule is just basically a listing of what are the supplies that you're going to be able to make, and we're going to allocate those supplies between apples and oranges. So I'm going to give you a rule and say that you can only work 10 hours a day. That's your assumption, right? Otherwise, you're going to get very tired. So we're assuming you're going to only work 10 hours a day, and it's going to take you 1 hour to climb each tree to pick each apple, a bunch of apples, a bunch of oranges, right? So the most you can do is 10 in a day because, again, I'm only letting you work 10 hours, which is already a lot. And also, excuse me, also, you are going to have to choose how many apples, how many oranges you need to eat in that day. So let's have a look. So if you can only work 10 hours a day, one bunch of fruit per hour, suppose you work all apples, right? How many of those are you going to be able to obtain? How many of those are you going to be able to obtain in your day if you work all 10 hours? So logically speaking, 10, right? No, not 19, 10. Because that means you will be at this point over here, and you will have going across for oranges, you will have 0, right? And let me make these a bit thinner and insert some, right-click, insert some more columns, right-click, insert some more columns, so we can have some more numbers in here. So this is going to be 0 across for oranges, and it's going to be 10 up for apples. So that would be this point here. Because again, you're only working 10 hours. I'm giving you some assumptions. And if you have 10 apples, you have to have 0 oranges because you can only work 10 hours, and each hour you're going to have one bunch of this fruit or the other fruit. Okay, so this is your supply schedule. Conversely, if you pick 0 apples, then you're going to be over here, you're going to be able to pick 10 oranges, correct? That'll give you 10 oranges. And going up, you're not going up at all. So going up, you will be at 0 apples because you pick 10 of these. You cannot pick any of the other ones. So then we'll be here. And basically what's going to happen is whatever number you pick here, let's say it's 9, you can only work 10 hours a day. So I'm going to put in here what's called a function, which is going to say 10 is your maximum of oranges, minus however many apples you get. That's how many oranges are going to be left over. So does that make sense? 10 is the most you can do. And so depending how many apples I have here, then the remainder, 10 minus that, is going to give me the oranges. So I'm going to fill this in. 8 apples is 2 oranges. That equals 10. 7 apples is 3 oranges. That equals 10. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So basically, you can only pick 10. So the more apples you have, the less oranges you have. The more oranges you have, the less apples you have. That's called a trade-off. And when I draw that line of all those points, what's going to happen is I'm going to get this kind of, where are we now? I'm going to get this kind of straight line here, connecting the dots. And then you can understand that in the middle here, if I have 5 here, I'm going to be exactly in the middle there. I'm going to have 5 there. And I'm going to be at this point. Let me illustrate that with a little dot, maybe. That's a big dot. We don't want such a big dot. Anyway, that's going to be a little dot right there. If I have 10 and 0, I'm going to put a little dot over here. 10 apples, 0 oranges. If I have 10 oranges, 0 apples, I'm going to put a little dot over there. And likewise, if I have a 3, what did we say? 3 apples is 7 oranges. So I'm going to have a 7 oranges over here. And then I'm going to put a dot over here. I'm actually not exactly in the right spot with my dots, but I'm actually I have to make a confession, I'm very bad at art. And yeah, 7 has to be more in between the 5 and the 10. So basically, if I put a dot down here for all of these, you should do this exercise because it'll help you get a really great grade on the test. If you put all the dots, write these down and put all the dots on a grid, if I were to restore this background to grid lines, if you were to put all these dots on a grid like on Excel, then you would see that they all line up very neatly, okay? So this is your production possibilities curve, and it's a choice between 2 things. So that's why we're going to call it a trade-off. And I'm going to ask you to, by all means, practice making one of these on your own. You could change these numbers, right? You can make this, whatever the difference is between, let's say 20 minus the other one, but you can't work 20 hours. So this would have to be, these numbers would have to be all in the teens, basically. So this would be, 20 minus 9 is 11, and let me put 20 here. And let me copy this function up to here. 20 apples, 0 oranges. And then if we had let's say 18 apples, 2 oranges, and let's just make these all minus 2. Minus 2 from the number above. And copy it all the way down. And then I need to make this 20 minus whatever was over there. So this is 21 minus, okay, we can't go past 0. So here's an example with 20. and then you'd have the same thing would happen. You would have 20, 20, and when you put all these lines on the graph, you would have over here between this, the middle would be 10 and 10. I don't want to confuse you. I just want to show you any bunch of numbers here will work as long as they add up to your total. And now I'm saying you can work 20 hours a day. Let's say you have two people on the island, you and your partner, your friend, and each of you can work 10 hours. So that's 20 hours a day. So for the two of you, how many, like one of these survivor shows, how many can you pick? 20 a day. And if you pick all apples, there's no oranges. If you pick 10 apples, there's 10 oranges because now you're working 10 hours each, right? And that point would be there. And then what would be halfway down here would be 5. Halfway between 10 and 20. Oh, sorry, there's 15. 15 of this, 5 of that. So this is, okay, I don't have these in 5s. I have 4 and 16. Let's do that. 4. I have these in 2s. So 4 apples means 16 oranges because, again, you're working 20 hours a day between the two of you. And then over here, you'd have 16 oranges and 4 apples. That's going to add up to 20 hours. And that dot is going to be over there. Whoops, sorry about that. That dot is going to be over there. So pardon me. Sorry, sometimes your throat gets dry when you're working and talking all the time. So you can make the same kind of line. So I would encourage you to take this Excel and practice, and maybe I'll even put it in the in the Blackboard so you can play with it and you can see how it works. Okay, so that's the end of what we're talking about today. For diminishing returns, it'll be a little different. We'll come back to that next time. And that's it.